The dinner table was set with my mother's best china, candles flickering between the salt and pepper shakers. My Cornell acceptance letter sat unopened beside my plate, the thick envelope practically glowing with possibility. Dad stood up with a huge grin, pulling something from his pocket. Car keys dangled from his fingers as he tossed them across the table to my brother Kyle. "Congratulations, son. Brand new Honda Civic, parked right outside." Kyle jumped up, whooping with excitement. "Dad, are you serious? This is amazing." I looked down at my acceptance letter, then back at my father. "Dad, you said we'd talk about my tuition tonight. Cornell accepted me with partial scholarship, but I still need $20,000 for the first year." His smile faded slightly. "We just can't afford everything right now, sweetheart. You're smart, you'll figure something out." Through the window, I could hear Kyle revving his new car engine, the sound echoing through our quiet neighborhood. "But you could afford a $15,000 car?" I asked quietly. "That's different. Kyle needs reliable transportation for work. College is, well, it's not for everyone." I sat there, my eyes burning with unshed tears but my jaw steady with determination. That was the night I learned what family investment really meant. My name is Megan Rowe. Before I tell you how it all started, I have to ask you for a favor. Write in the comments where you're watching me from. I'd love to see how far this voice travels. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your help is very important. What I'm about to share with you is something I never thought could happen to me at home. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and the kind of evil that hides behind a smile. I got into Cornell with a partial scholarship. It was my dream school, the place where I'd planned to study business and engineering. But my dad said I wasn't worth the investment. I sat at the bus stop the next morning, still holding my unopened acceptance letter. Around me, other kids my age were probably getting ready for their own college journeys, with parents who believed in their potential. Please subscribe, because sometimes karma just needs a little storytelling to help. What my father didn't know that morning, as Kyle drove past me in his shiny new car, was that he'd just made the biggest financial mistake of his life. He didn't know I'd make myself the best investment he ever lost. But I knew. Even sitting at that bus stop, tears finally falling onto the Cornell envelope, I knew I was going to prove him wrong in ways he couldn't imagine. I ripped the Cornell letter in half that afternoon, standing in my bedroom with pieces of my future scattered on the carpet. The sound of the paper tearing felt final, like closing a door I'd been dreaming of walking through since I was 12. Mom knocked on my door an hour later, finding me staring at the torn pieces. "Honey, maybe this is for the best," she said softly, sitting on my bed. "College is so expensive, and there's no guarantee of a job afterward. You could always marry well, find a nice husband who can provide for you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw everything I didn't want to become. A woman who'd given up her own dreams so completely that she couldn't imagine her daughter having any. "No, Mom," I said, sweeping the letter pieces into my trash can. "I won't marry well. I'll build well." She looked confused by my response, but I was already moving toward my laptop. "What are you doing?" "Researching affordable colleges nearby. If Dad won't invest in my education, I'll invest in myself." I spent the rest of the evening searching for community colleges with strong business programs, scholarship opportunities, and night classes that would let me work during the day. Cornell was gone, but my ambition wasn't. The Valley View Diner became my second home for the next 8 months. I worked double shifts, serving coffee and eggs to truckers and early morning commuters, saving every penny for tuition. Dad visited once, sliding into a booth during my lunch rush and ordering black coffee. He looked around at the greasy tables and worn vinyl seats with obvious distaste. "You know, this could all end tomorrow if you'd just be realistic about your future," he said, stirring sugar into his cup. "Kyle's doing great at the factory. Making good money, steady hours. There might be an opening in the filing department." My hands tightened around the coffee pot I was holding. "I'm not interested in filing, Dad. You'll thank me someday for steering you away from these impossible dreams. After he left, I stood in the diner bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and staring at my reflection. My uniform was stained with ketchup, my hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and I looked exhausted. But I wasn't defeated. That evening, I checked my email and found the message I'd been waiting for. Congratulations! You've been accepted to Metro Community College with a partial academic scholarship. It wasn't Cornell, but it was the beginning of something bigger. The computer lab at Metro Community College was open until midnight, and I became a regular fixture there. While other students went to parties or watched movies, I taught myself programming languages and business software. If no one else will invest in me, I will, I whispered to myself one night, debugging code for the third straight hour. That's when I noticed Alyssa Grant watching me from across the lab. She was older than most students, probably in her late 20s, and always seemed to be working on complex projects that made my homework look simple. You're here every night, she said, pulling up a chair beside me. What are you working on? I showed her the inventory management system I was building for my business class. It was supposed to be a simple assignment, but I'd added features for cost tracking, supplier management, and efficiency analysis. This is graduate-level work, she said, scrolling through my code. Why are you at community college? I told her about Cornell, about my father's choice, about working at the diner to pay for classes. Alyssa nodded thoughtfully. I run a small logistics startup downtown. We need someone who understands both the technical side and the business side. Interested in an internship? It was the opportunity I'd been working toward without even realizing it. When can I start? Streamcore Logistics operated out of a converted basement in an old office building downtown. The space was dusty and cramped, with mismatched furniture and a coffee machine that only worked when you kicked it just right. But it was the most exciting place I'd ever worked. My official title was administrative assistant, which mostly meant I made coffee, answered phones, and filed paperwork. But Alyssa quickly discovered that I could fix database problems no one else understood and design systems that actually improved efficiency. You're overqualified for grunt work, our project manager laughed one day, watching me rebuild their entire client tracking system. That's what they all said, I replied, not looking up from my screen. The breakthrough came 3 months into my internship. Streamcore was struggling to land a major contract with a manufacturing company that needed help optimizing their supply chain. I spent a weekend analyzing their data and building a custom algorithm that could reduce their shipping costs by 30%. Monday morning, Alyssa presented my solution to the client. They signed the contract immediately. This saves us over $200,000 annually, the client said, shaking Alyssa's hand. Your team is exactly what we needed. That algorithm didn't just save the client money. It saved Streamcore from bankruptcy and established us as serious players in the logistics industry. The staff meeting was held in our tiny conference room, with everyone crowded around a folding table covered in coffee-stained papers. Our project manager stood at the front, beaming with pride as he discussed the success of our manufacturing client. The algorithm we developed has revolutionized their shipping efficiency, he announced, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation. This innovative system has positioned Streamcore as a leader in logistics optimization. I clapped politely along with everyone else, even though every slide showed work I'd done in my apartment over that weekend. My code, my analysis, my late-night problem-solving sessions had become his innovative system. This is just the beginning, he continued. With systems like this, we can compete with the biggest firms in the industry. After the meeting, I approached him privately. I noticed you didn't mention that I developed the algorithm. He looked surprised, then dismissive. Well, you're part of the team. Team effort, right? Right, I said, smiling tightly. Team effort. But inside, I was thinking something different. Fine. Take the credit. I'll take the skill. 2 weeks later, Alyssa knocked on my cubicle wall. I'm leaving Streamcore, she said quietly. Starting my own firm. Want to be my business partner? It was the opportunity I'd been building toward without realizing it. Alyssa and I launched our new company from her living room, with 2 laptops, a shared phone line, and business cards we'd printed at the local copy shop. We called ourselves Grant Row Logistics, combining our names to suggest the kind of partnership that could take on established firms. Our first client was a small warehouse distributor who needed help tracking inventory across multiple locations. The contract was modest, $5,000 for a 3-month project, but it was ours. I spent 2 weeks building a custom tracking system that not only solved their immediate problem but identified inefficiencies they hadn't even known existed. "This is remarkable work," the client said during our final presentation. "You've potentially saved US tens of thousands of dollars annually." "Thank you," Alyssa replied. "We specialize in finding solutions that others miss." After the client left, I was reviewing the contract paperwork when something caught my attention. The warehouse distributor was a subsidiary of a larger manufacturing company. The parent company was called Rowe Industrial Manufacturing. My father's company. I stared at the letterhead for a long moment, recognizing the logo I'd seen on his work shirts for years. The company where Kyle had gotten his entry-level job, the company Dad was always praising for its practical approach to business. "Alyssa," I said carefully, "I think our next client presentation might be interesting." The annual Rowe family barbecue was a neighborhood tradition, with Dad grilling burgers while bragging to anyone who'd listen about Kyle's latest promotion at the factory. "That boy's got a real head for business," he told Mr. Patterson from next door, flipping a burger with obvious pride. "Just got moved to shipping coordination. Management track, you know." I sat at the picnic table, quietly eating coleslaw and listening to him describe Kyle's brilliant career trajectory. 6 months out of high school, and Kyle was apparently destined for executive leadership. "And how's Megan doing?" Mrs. Patterson asked politely. "Still in school?" Dad's expression shifted slightly. "Oh, Meg's still playing with computers. Community college, you know. Keeps her busy." "Playing with computers," I repeated softly, more to myself than anyone else. "That's what I said. Nothing wrong with hobbies, but Kyle's building a real career." My phone buzzed with a text from Alyssa, "Contract approved. Your father's company just signed with us for a full efficiency audit. 6-figure deal." I nearly choked on my coleslaw. "Something wrong?" Mom asked. "No," I said, standing to clear my plate. "Everything's perfect." That evening, while Kyle showed off his car to the neighbors and Dad basked in reflected glory, I reviewed the contract details Alyssa had forwarded. Rowe Industrial Manufacturing had hired us to analyze their entire operation and identify areas for cost reduction. Installing our tracking software at Rowe Industrial felt surreal. I walked through the factory floors where my father had worked for 15 years, watching our algorithms begin collecting data on everything from shipping delays to inventory waste. The inefficiencies were obvious almost immediately. Outdated processes, poor communication between departments, and a management structure that prioritized seniority over competence. Dad complained about the changes during dinner that week. "This new computer system is brutal," he said, stabbing his mashed potatoes with unnecessary force. "Tracking every minute, every movement. They're cutting everyone's hours based on some efficiency nonsense." "What kind of efficiency analysis?" I asked innocently. "Some consulting firm came in, acting like they know our business better than we do. Probably fresh out of college, never worked a real day in their lives." I hid my grin behind my water glass. "Sounds frustrating." "Kyle's been smart about it, though. Made sure to hit all his numbers, keep his head down. That's how you survive corporate politics." 2 weeks later, I received an email invitation that made my heart race. Management Review Meeting, Rowe Industrial Manufacturing, Strategic Recommendations Presentation. The email was addressed to the consulting team from Grant Rowe Logistics, requesting our presence for a board-level presentation of our findings. Dad would be there. All the senior management would be there. And I would be there, representing the company that was about to expose 15 years of operational failures. The conference room at Row Industrial was exactly what I'd expected, wood paneling, leather chairs, and a long table that screamed serious business decisions happen here. I arrived early with Alyssa, setting up our presentation materials and testing the projector. When the management team began filing in, I recognized several faces from Dad's work stories over the years. Then Dad walked in, mid-conversation with Kyle about weekend fishing plans. He glanced toward the front of the room, probably expecting to see typical corporate consultants in expensive suits. Instead, he saw me. "Meg? What are you doing here?" The entire room went quiet. Other managers looked between us, clearly sensing family drama. "I'm Streamcore's lead operations consultant," I said calmly, gesturing toward our company presentation on the screen. Dad's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that might have been embarrassment. He laughed awkwardly, looking around at his colleagues. "This is my daughter. She goes to community college." Actually, Alyssa interjected smoothly, "Megan has a degree in business operations and she developed the analysis system we're presenting today." I smiled at my father across the conference table. "This is just business, Dad." The presentation was about to begin, and he was about to learn what his investment in Kyle's car had really cost him. Our data presentation was devastating in its clarity. 15 years of inefficient practices, highlighted in charts and graphs that left no room for interpretation. Department 7 has the highest per unit cost and the longest processing times, I explained, clicking to a slide that showed Dad's shipping coordination department. Outdated procedures and resistance to modernization have created a bottleneck that affects the entire production line. The board members leaned forward, studying the numbers with obvious concern. "These inefficiencies are costing approximately $400,000 annually," Alyssa continued. "Our recommendations include immediate process restructuring and personnel evaluation." Dad sat frozen in his chair, realizing that his daughter, the one he deemed unworthy of college investment, was systematically dismantling his professional reputation with actual data. "The shipping coordination manager position appears to be redundant," I said, advancing to the next slide. "Most of these responsibilities could be automated or redistributed to more efficient departments." After the presentation, the board applauded our thoroughness and professionalism. Several members approached us with questions about implementation timelines and additional consulting opportunities. Dad didn't approach us at all. As we packed up our materials, I overheard one board member say to another, "Those consultants just saved us $500,000 annually. Best investment we've made in years." I thought about that phrase, best investment, all the way home. He told me college wasn't worth the money. I'd just proven I was worth considerably more than he'd ever imagined. The family dinner that weekend was tense from the moment I walked through the door. Dad sat at the head of the table, his jaw tight and his eyes avoiding mine. "So," he said finally, cutting his steak with precise, angry movements. "You're embarrassing me in front of my entire company." "I'm doing my job," I replied calmly. "Analyzing data and making recommendations." "Your recommendations are going to cost people their jobs. People I've worked with for years." Kyle looked up from his phone. "What's everyone talking about?" "Your sister thinks she's some kind of business expert now," Dad said. "Walking into my workplace like she owns the place." "Funny," I said, meeting his eyes across the table. "That's exactly what you did to me at this dinner table. Decided my future wasn't worth investing in while Kyle got a car for existing." "That's completely different." "Is it?" "You made a financial decision based on who you thought deserved support. I'm making professional recommendations based on who deserves to keep their job." Kyle finally put down his phone. "Wait, you're the consultant everyone's talking about at the factory?" "Dude, people are freaking out about getting fired." "People are concerned about accountability," I corrected. "Some of them should be." Dad slammed his fork down. "You're my daughter. You're supposed to be loyal to family. You taught me that loyalty has to be earned, I said quietly. And that investment goes to whoever proves their worth. Mom tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. Kyle sided with Dad, calling me jealous and vindictive. But I wasn't jealous anymore. I was strategic. Alyssa called me 3 weeks after our Row Industrial presentation with news that would change everything. They want to sell shares, she said, her voice barely containing excitement. The board is looking for outside investors to fund the modernization we recommended. I was sitting in my apartment, reviewing quarterly reports for our other clients, when the implications hit me. How much are they selling? 30% of the company. They're looking for someone who understands their operational challenges and has a vision for improvement. I'd been saving every penny from our consulting contracts, living in a studio apartment and driving a 15-year-old car. My bank account wasn't impressive, but it was substantial enough for what I was considering. What if I formed a holding company to make the investment anonymously? Megan, that would give you significant influence over company decisions. Are you sure you want that kind of responsibility? I thought about Dad's dismissive comments, about Kyle's unearned confidence. About all the times I'd been told I wasn't worth the risk. Set up a meeting with their financial advisors, I said. I want to buy 12% of Row Industrial Manufacturing. By the end of the month, I owned a substantial stake in the company where my father had worked for 15 years. He still thought I was just the tech girl who'd gotten lucky with one consulting contract. The merger opportunity came 6 months later, when Consolidated Manufacturing approached Alyssa about acquiring Grantro Logistics. They were a larger firm looking to expand their consulting capabilities, and our track record with efficiency improvements had caught their attention. The offer is substantial, Alyssa told me during our meeting in what had become our actual office, a rented space with real furniture and a coffee machine that worked properly. But more importantly, Consolidated has existing contracts with several companies in our area. Including Row Industrial? Including Row Industrial. If we accept this merger, we'd have combined influence over their operations through both our consulting relationship and your investment stake. I calculated what this meant. Consulting influence plus ownership stake plus the resources of a larger firm. How much combined influence are we talking about? Controlling interest. You'd essentially have decision-making authority over most operational changes. I thought about my father's words from that dinner a year ago, college isn't for everyone, sweetheart. You'll figure something out. I had figured something out. Accept the merger, I said. If I can't make him proud, I'll make him report to me. The paperwork took 3 weeks to finalize. By the end of the process, I had controlling interest in Row Industrial Manufacturing through a combination of direct ownership and consulting influence. My father still had no idea that his daughter now owned the company he'd devoted his career to. The acquisition moved through legal channels with the quiet efficiency of large corporate transactions. Papers were signed, stocks were transferred, and ownership structures were reorganized with the kind of professional discretion that keeps family drama out of business decisions. I watched each step through my lawyer, maintaining anonymity through the holding company while ensuring every detail was properly documented. By the end of this week, you'll own majority control, my attorney confirmed during our final meeting. The transition will be seamless from a business perspective. And from a personal perspective? That depends on how you handle the family dynamics. I spent that entire week thinking about what this meant. I owned the company where my father worked, the place Kyle had gotten his management track position, the business Dad had always held up as an example of practical success over impractical dreams. On Friday afternoon, I signed the final documents in my lawyer's office. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like it was signing more than just legal papers. Congratulations, my attorney said, shaking my hand. You now own Row Industrial Manufacturing. I drove home that evening thinking about a conversation I'd had with my father 2 years ago, when he'd told me that college was a waste of money and I should focus on finding a practical career. He'd been right about one thing, I had found a practical career. I'd just never mentioned that it involved buying his employer. The internal memo went out on a Monday morning to all Rowe Industrial Manufacturing employees. Ownership and leadership transition pending. Mandatory staff meeting Friday 2 p.m. I heard about it through Kyle, who called me during his lunch break in a panic. Meg, something crazy is happening at the company. They're calling everyone to some emergency meeting about new ownership. Dad's freaking out, thinking they're going to sell to some corporate raider who'll fire everyone. What kind of new ownership? I asked innocently. Nobody knows. The memo was super vague, just said there would be leadership restructuring and operational improvements based on recent efficiency evaluations. I almost smiled. The efficiency evaluations he was referring to were mine. I'm sure it'll be fine, I said. Companies change ownership all the time. Dad's convinced it's someone who wants to gut the place and sell off the assets. He keeps saying probably another corporate puppet who's never worked a real day. That evening, Dad came home from work looking older than I'd ever seen him. He sat at the kitchen table with a beer and the newspaper, though he wasn't really reading either. 23 years with this company, he said to no one in particular. Built my career here, raised my family on this paycheck. What's going to happen? Mom asked. Corporate restructuring. That's what they always call it when they're planning to fire everyone over 50. Maybe the new owners will appreciate experienced employees, I suggested. Dad looked at me with tired eyes. Honey, new owners don't care about experience. They care about profit margins and efficiency reports. He had no idea how right he was. Friday afternoon, I stood outside Rowe Industrial Manufacturing, wearing my best business suit and carrying a briefcase that contained the ownership documents I'd been working toward for 2 years. The parking lot was full of nervous employees heading into the building for the mandatory meeting. I saw Dad's truck in its usual spot, Kyle's Honda parked beside it. Inside, the main conference room had been set up with rows of folding chairs facing a presentation screen. Employees filed in quietly, the tension obvious in their hushed conversations and worried expressions. I entered through the executive entrance, taking my place at the head table where the board of directors was already seated. Dad was sitting in the third row, scanning the front of the room for clues about who was about to control his future. His eyes passed right over me, probably assuming I was someone's assistant or note-taker. The board chairman stood to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for Rowe Industrial Manufacturing. He gestured toward me. I'd like to introduce our new majority owner and chief operating officer, Megan Rowe. I stood up, facing the room full of people I'd grown up hearing stories about. Dad's face went completely white. Good afternoon, everyone, I said calmly. Let's start by reviewing some operational efficiency reports. The restructuring meeting lasted 2 hours, with detailed presentations about departmental performance, cost analysis, and personnel evaluation. I kept my tone professional and my recommendations focused on business optimization rather than personal grievances. But the data told its own story. Department 7 has consistently underperformed in productivity metrics, I explained, clicking through slides that showed shipping coordination statistics. The current management structure in this department is redundant and costly. Dad sat frozen in his chair as charts and graphs demonstrated what I'd learned over months of analysis. His department was hemorrhaging money through outdated procedures and resistance to improvement. The board has voted unanimously to retire underperforming management positions effective immediately, I continued. Severance packages have been prepared for affected personnel. After the general meeting, I met with individual employees in private sessions. Most were relieved to learn their jobs were secure under new management. Some expressed excitement about modernization plans and efficiency improvements. Dad's meeting was scheduled last. He entered my temporary office looking defeated and confused, probably still trying to process how his daughter had acquired control of his workplace. I have your severance package here, I said, sliding the paperwork across the desk. 23 years of service, full benefits, and a retirement bonus. He tried to speak, but I raised my hand gently. It's not personal, Dad. It's just business. 6 months later, I drove past our old house and saw Kyle's prized Honda sitting rusted in the driveway. Repo notices were taped to the windshield, and the car hadn't moved in weeks. I was driving my new electric sedan. Practical, efficient, and purchased with profits from the company modernization that had increased productivity by 40%. Kyle was standing in the driveway, talking on his phone with obvious frustration. When he saw me pull up, he ended the call and walked over to my car window. "Nice ride," he said, his voice flat with resignation. "Thank you. How are things going?" "Dad's been looking for work, but nobody wants to hire a 55-year-old shipping manager." "And I?" "Well, turns out I wasn't as management track material as we thought." The factory had let Kyle go 3 months after Dad's termination, when the new efficiency standards made it clear he couldn't perform basic job functions without constant supervision. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you, though?" "Really?" I considered his question seriously. "I'm sorry you're struggling." "I'm not sorry that actions have consequences." "You sound just like him, you know." Like Dad when he used to lecture us about responsibility and earning what we get. Maybe I learned something from him after all. Kyle kicked at the gravel in our driveway. "So what now? You've got the company, the success, everything you wanted to prove. Was it worth it?" I looked at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd been told my dreams weren't worth investing in. The goal was never revenge, Kyle. It was balance. Mom visited my office the following week, sitting across from my desk in what had once been Dad's workplace. The space had been completely renovated, modern furniture, updated technology, and large windows that filled the room with natural light. "I never understood what you were doing," she said quietly, looking around at the certificates and awards on my walls. "All those nights studying, working at the diner, building those computer programs. I thought you were just stubborn." I was stubborn. That's what made the difference. "Your father's having a hard time," she continued. "Not just with work. With understanding how this happened. How his little girl became someone who could do what you did." I thought about that carefully. What I did was exactly what he taught me to do. I invested in something I believed in. I worked hard. I made smart decisions. I demanded accountability from people who weren't performing. But you used it against your own family. I used it to build something valuable. The fact that it affected our family was Dad's choice, not mine. Mom was quiet for a moment, then reached across the desk to touch my hand. "He's proud of you, you know. He won't say it, and he's angry about how it happened, but he's proud. He should be." I did exactly what he always said Kyle would do. I made something of myself through hard work and determination. "Kyle was never like you, Megan. You were always different. Driven. Dad just never bothered to notice." She squeezed my hand. "Now he finally knows what you were worth." The Business Journal interview was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in my office, with a photographer who spent 20 minutes getting the lighting just right for the accompanying article. "Local woman acquires manufacturing firm that initially rejected her potential," the headline would read, with a subheading about turning family disappointment into corporate success. "What would you say to your younger self?" the reporter asked, her digital recorder capturing every word. I thought about the 18-year-old girl who'd sat at that bus stop, holding a torn Cornell acceptance letter and wondering if she was worth believing in. "I'd say keep the receipt for every time they doubt you," I replied. "Because someday you'll want to show them the return on investment." Do you have any regrets about how this situation developed? I regret that it took professional success for my family to recognize my capabilities. But I don't regret building something valuable from the opportunities one was given. And your advice for other young people facing similar family dynamics? Don't wait for permission to invest in yourself. And don't let other people's limitations become your own. After the interview, my phone buzzed with a call from Dad's number. I looked at it for a long moment, then let it go to voicemail. Some conversations were better left unhad. The article would be published next week, and that would say everything I needed to communicate. Kyle called me the following month, his voice tentative in a way I'd never heard before. Meg? I know we haven't talked much lately, but I was wondering, do you think there might be a position at Mr. Industries for someone with my experience? Mr. Industries was what I'd renamed the company after the restructuring was complete. Most people assumed it stood for Modern Resources or something similarly corporate. It actually stood for Megan Rowe. What kind of experience are you referring to? I asked, genuinely curious about his answer. Well, I worked in shipping coordination for 8 months. I understand the basic processes, and I'm willing to learn new systems. Kyle, the shipping coordination department doesn't exist anymore. We automated most of those functions and redistributed the rest to other teams. Oh. What about entry-level positions? I'm not too proud to start over. I thought about this carefully. Kyle genuinely seemed to understand that his previous assumptions about automatic success weren't valid anymore. I don't think we have any roles that fit your current qualifications, I said finally. But there are community colleges in the area that offer excellent programs in business operations and logistics technology. You sound just like Dad used to. Always talking about education and practical skills. Maybe I learned something from him after all, I said, echoing our conversation from weeks earlier. He was right about one thing, wasn't he? College really isn't for everyone. No, Kyle. College is for people who are willing to work for it. The scholarship fund was announced 6 months later, at the same time Mr. Industries opened its new headquarters downtown. The building was modern and efficient, with green technology and open workspace design that reflected the company's transformation. The Megan Rowe Educational Foundation will provide full tuition assistance to students pursuing business and technology degrees, I announced during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Specifically for students who have been told their educational goals aren't practical investments. Alyssa, who'd become my business partner and closest friend, laughed at the foundation's mission statement. Modest, aren't you? It's not about modesty. It's about accuracy. Mr. Industries, she said, looking up at the sign on our new building. I'm still not used to that name. It stands for exactly what it should stand for, I replied. Megan Rowe, but also moving right. Forward progress based on merit instead of assumptions. The first scholarship recipient was an 18-year-old girl whose parents had refused to co-sign college loans because they didn't think women needed higher education. You don't understand what this opportunity means, she told me when I called to inform her about the assistance. Actually, I said, thinking about my own 18-year-old self, I understand exactly what it means. That evening, I signed the paperwork to establish the foundation as a permanent endowment, ensuring it would continue helping students long after I was gone. Dad had been wrong about college not being for everyone. It just wasn't for everyone who wasn't willing to fight for it. The final scene of this story takes place in my corner office overlooking the city, 2 years after I'd bought the company my father once worked for. I was reviewing quarterly reports that showed Mr. Industries had doubled in value under my management, with employee satisfaction ratings that consistently ranked among the highest in the industry. Through my window, I could see the building where I'd once been told my dreams weren't worth investing in. That seemed like a different lifetime now, though it had only been 4 years since the dinner where Kyle got a car and I got dismissed. On my desk sat 2 framed items. My community college diploma and my Cornell acceptance letter, carefully taped back together. I'd never attended Cornell, but I'd built something better than what any degree could have given me. He wouldn't pay for my education, I said to myself, touching the repaired letter. So I educated myself and bought the classroom. I turned toward the camera I'd set up for the video I was recording, feeling peaceful about the story I was ready to share. My name is Megan Rowe, and please subscribe, because sometimes karma doesn't need help. Sometimes karma just needs patience and the courage to invest in yourself when nobody else will. I turned off the camera and walked toward my office door, where my team was gathering for our weekly strategy meeting. Outside, Kyle's old Honda was probably still sitting rusted in my parents' driveway. But I was driving forward.